Welcome to Psychic Girls Next Door. We are your hosts, Shannon Miller
and Lili. This podcast is for all spirituality enthusiasts and psychics next door to share tools, experiences, and spiritual practices that align with your highest vibrational self.
On this episode, we will be sharing our work experiences, getting a little tongue-tied there, and career path. We will also share how our intuitive abilities show up and how they showed up in the past. Did we follow or use any of them during those experiences? And what our lessons or lessons learned, what our lesson or lessons that we learned or are still learning from those experiences. I hope that was clear.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. little tongue tied there, but I'll start by sharing my own work experience. So the first job I had, I worked as a babysitter when I was 12 years old. So I babysat a family, and they had I think a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. But then I also did swim, a swim team coach. My mom was a swim team coach, and for this group of 4 to 5-year-olds called polywalks. So I helped her with that. She would give us $20, or a promise of a concert ticket or whatever it was to help her out and kind of corral all these little kids. And then in tandem, I would babysit for this family who also did swim team with us. And they had a lot of abundance, and it was really cool to spend time with them because they had Netflix before it was on the streaming platform. They had all these DVDs, and you knew that when Netflix came out, you had to rent a DVD. It's kind of like an at-home delivery service, like an at-home Blockbuster in a way. And so they always would have 4 to 6 DVDs. And I was like, oh, they have abundance if they have 4 to 6 DVDs of the OG Netflix DVDs. So I loved being able to connect with that family. And then the mom or the dad would drive me home and we would just chat. And I think I was 12 or 13 at the time. And I think I only babysat for them for a few years. And then my sister would babysit for them after me. And then the next job I had, I was working at a swim club in Antioch where I grew up. And as soon as I got my driver's permit, my mom was like, you have to get a job. And I'm like, okay. So I got a job. She would drive with me, or I would drive myself. And maybe this was I got the job a few months before when I had the permit. I can't really remember, but I knew that I was driving myself to work when I first got my license. So maybe I was 16. And then I was teaching swim lessons during the week for a few days after school from 3:30 or 4 to 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. And then on Sunday mornings, I would have to clean windows at 7 a.m.
Ooh,
it was
it's a tough one.
It was a tough one. And I am not a morning person. I am a night owl for sure. So getting up at 6 a.m. to go clean windows and just sweat my ass off, excuse my language, but just sweating bullets. And I think at the time I was getting into partying with my friends on Saturday nights. And it was of those decisions that you make when you're 16 of having to I can have a few Smirnoff ices and then go wake up at 6 a.m. and be up till 1 in the morning and not getting a lot of sleep. And I think that experience was no, you can't be in a job where you have to do that. If you want to do the nighttime activities, you can't be fully functioning in the morning. And I hated it. I hated cleaning windows. So that job did not last for too long. But then the next job I had in high school, my aunt worked at a hair salon, and the owner owned a few different salons, and he had opened up this day spa salon where it was massages and facials, and then he was going to build out the hair salon eventually, but that never ended up coming into fruition. So he gave me a job. he was really creepy, but he was never there. I worked with some amazing women who were there, but it was my first admin job. So I was doing like admin and operations of scheduling and confirming like appointments. And it made me realize like, oh, this is like a really easy thing for me to do. And that set up me and all my admin jobs throughout my early 20s and even into my late 20s. So then I was in college, and I always had a job in college too. I studied abroad in Rome. So luckily I didn't have to work when I was in Rome, but my dad was working as an athletic field supervisor at my college, where I went to school. And then, he worked in the facilities department. So I was able to get a job as an admin, a front desk admin, like checking people in and then doing like, you know, PO, like I can't even remember what I was working on, but like kind of like payroll stuff and like, you know, just processing paperwork with the actual like facilities office manager. So she would give me tasks, and I was able to see like how an office department is how it works and like how it functions. So that gave me a kind of a good foundation of like how things should be done. I mean, whether that was accurate or not, who knows? But she was really cool, and she was really witchy too. She was really, and that now that
How
I'm thinking, so she had this really cool tattoo, like you know the full moon with the 2 half moons on her wrist, and she was giving me like, this was before I had fully tapped into my spirituality. There had been, you know, bouts of spirituality from like ghost experiences or like, you know, as we talked about in our last episode, but she like was talking, she would tell me about astrology and signs, and we just would like connect on that level. So she would tell me about these healers, but then she threw out her back and then she had to quit. So then we got another person who came in, and I had worked there for three and a half years on and off throughout my college, you know, career. And so for the first part of it, it was with this really cool, like kind of witchy vibe woman. And then another person who actually lived where we grew up. So it was kind of like, felt very homegrown and natural. And then I learned a lot about how to like be a front desk person, like the etiquette that you would need. And like, just, I'm very bubbly and friendly. So it's easy for me to be in that type of role. And usually not every place has a bubbly, friendly front desk receptionist.
True.
But,
yes.
You know, it helps. It helps to have someone who wants to, you know, chat and like figure out who people are who are coming in. So then I was kind of resistant to getting a corporate job right after college. A lot of my friends were like interviewing their like last semester of senior year. And I was like, I don't even know like how that even looks like, or because both my parents are not corporate people, and I had no information on like what the corporate world really looked like besides like TV shows or things that I had heard from like maybe my friends' parents who worked in corporate, but a lot of my friends' parents didn't work in corporate either. So I got a job as a nanny. I nannied for a 14 and 15-year-old, and one of them was adopted. So that was an interesting dynamic. And they would always fight. Whenever their fights would happen, it would be like, well, you're adopted. You're not really part of this family anyway. So it went there.
Wow.
And the adopted, the older sibling was a year older than her, and she was adopted from like a Native American tribe. So, but they grew up in this very like white Jewish affluent family, or like the dad was Jewish, the mom, I don't think she was Jewish. They were both lawyers and in Piedmont. So, and it was a really cool family dynamic. And I realized like, oh, I'm very fascinated by like family dynamics or workplace dynamics now. And so going into that experience, I taught a 15 and a half year old how to drive. I was 22 at the time. I'm like, I should not be. I'm like, what did I do to mock this up this experience? Like, I mean, how did we, you know, get by alive driving in Alameda?
You're here.
I'm
so
here now.
You did something right.
Yeah, I did something right. No, I feel like I'm a naturally responsible person. So it wasn't shocking that I was like in that experience, but at the time I'm like, wow. So then after that, I was like, okay, I need to get like a real job. But I had made sure to get a replacement nanny. My friend was also a nanny at the time and kind of in a similar situation as me. And she wanted to get a new family to nanny for. So she they loved her, and she stayed with them for like 2 years, or like at least a year and a half after me, a lot longer than I stayed. So that made me feel really good. But I realized like it's hard for me to like let people down or like leave workplace situations, because I'm like, how are they going to feel without me? And I'm like, maybe this is like something that's been coming up recently, especially because like I like the job that I'm in now. Like I'm not looking, well, I'm always looking for a change, but in general, like when I was looking to leave jobs, it's been difficult for me to process that. And like maybe it's like, is it my information of like, you know, letting people down, or not wanting to burn any bridges? I think this concept of like, oh, you don't want to burn any bridges, like I think that's a really interesting narrative that a lot of people have in their energetic space of like, so every job that I've had, I'm like, well, I didn't burn any bridges, so I'm good. But then you carry on like the energy that like, if you just expressed yourself in some way that may have like, you know, a risk for burning a bridge.
Yeah,
So,
it's an interesting concept.
Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I almost see like as a limiting belief in a way.
It is,
right?
yeah.
Because it kind of doesn't give you permission to fully express yourself.
Right.
Right, at work, or even like have disagreements with people, or not even not like people.
Oh, yeah.
Because we don't get along with everyone at work. Let's
no.
just be honest.
Oh, not
you
at all.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like I had that rooted in like, my dad is a very like, he's a very kind person, and he's always like low expectations, high aspirations. And like the advice that he had given me going into like the corporate world, or he's like, just treat everyone as a really good acquaintance, and then if you get a friendship out of that, amazing. And then if not, like, then you just have a really good acquaintance. And I feel like that information has worked for me in a lot of the job dynamics I've been in, because it kind of like the word acquaintance for me is very neutral. Like you're comfortable with them, you see them all the time. You may not be close with them in the same way that a friendship is, but it's this concept of like, but at this, I don't know. So I don't want to go off in a tangent about that. I go off on tangents enough already, but going back to like that programmability, or like that his information, let's call it just his information. So about how you should treat people, and how, and where that kind of got it mixed up with this idea of like not burning a bridge. And so I had heard that from everyone in my family, like, oh, you don't want to burn a bridge. But I'm like, well, what's on the other side of that? Like, you know, by expressing yourself, you might burn a bridge. Like, why is that? Or like by speaking your truth, you might burn a bridge, or by putting yourself first, you might burn a bridge. Well, light it on fire. Like,
and what's the worst that could happen?
Right. Maybe that bridge is
Maybe
not even meant to be there.
It was meant to be burned.
Yeah,
in the first place.
Exactly.
Right?
Maybe it's meant to be burned. Maybe it's Maybelline. No. So I think like from that experience, like it's like me reflecting back. This is so interesting. Like I just kind of had this click together. So I had kind of operated from that mentality around work, like always being nice to people, not wanting to burn a bridge. And growing up, I think I operated from that place in school too, of just like, you know, be kind of like the perfect one to not get in trouble. Like, don't ever get in trouble. And like
the good girl sort of
role. Yeah. Like, oh, you like, in sixth grade, I remember, this, if you talked in class, you got points off. So I had this huge perfectionist complex, like all throughout middle school, that I was able to go to therapy in eighth grade. And I highly recommend it, especially if you don't know that you have ADHD. I didn't get diagnosed in eighth grade, but I definitely was experiencing like symptoms of having ADHD, and like that perfectionist complex is, reflecting back on it, that definitely matches with some of the symptoms of ADHD. So at the time, I think I talked once, and I like was so mortified when I got a point off, and because I was the only one who was like, a perfect score, and it really like defined my identity in that classroom, right? Like, so when I got 1 point off, like the whole class was like, ooh, you know, like it was a whole big thing. And I was mortified, and I didn't feel perfect. And it really reflected like my worth in that moment. And so I've been running on that information my entire life of like not being a disruptor and not being almost like constricting myself and confining myself energetically to to fit in to a certain type of role. And so coming back into this like corporate dynamic, I was doing sales for the cultural exchange program. That was my next role. And that's where I met Lili, and I got the job in 2013, and it provided me an opportunity to move to San Francisco in the fall of 2013. And I learned so much about like how to kind of fit in the mold of a certain role. And like, sometimes you're like, this is so uncomfortable. This does not feel like me. Like I hated having to call 300 people a week to try to sell this like cultural exchange program. And then I was like, this is like where I don't feel comfortable. I'm not living my truth, and like this role is not meant for me. So then I was able to move into a billing coordinator role because the billing coordinator had left. So my friend, my coworker friend at the time, she was the client services manager. She taught me everything about how to do billing. So I did that for like 2.5 years, but a lot of the phone calls were based on like the cultural exchange person and the family. There was always a behavioral issue. So I would call to get an updated credit card number, and they would go off about a behavioral situation that happened in their home. And so it gave me a taste of like, wow, I have a lot of patience for people. Which is great. But it also gave me a taste of like, this is energetically draining. And
it is, because you're just taking it in.
Yeah.
All this people's anger.
Like creating space for other people.
But you take it in, but
toxic handling.
Yeah, but then where does it go?
Yeah.
It stays.
It stays
right?
somewhere. It sticks somewhere, and you can try to diffuse that toxicity. But that's actually like kind of the first. Maybe I have been a toxic handler in a lot of different ways. Because I know how to diffuse energy pretty like and transmit energy from other people. But at the time I was just like, I was in the meditation and clairvoyant training program that we had both gone to. You went a little bit later than I did. So I had started the program in 2015, and I was like transitioning. I think 2016 was like transition year of like, it was telling me you have to get out of this workplace environment. Like you have to get away from being yelled at on the phone for problems that are not yours, but you had to like fix them. And I'm a fixer. It's been something I've been working on recently a lot, on like having to kind of step back. And I'm currently in the apprenticeship program at our meditation school. And I realized it came up a few weeks ago of like me, I can see such a quick, easy solution to somebody else's problem that I like insert myself, or like most of the time I'm like naturally involved in some way. So I'm like, oh, well, I can do that for you, or I can fix that for you. And so I did that, and I got called out on it. And I was like, oh my God, I do that. I do that all the time in so many different situations where I like fix things for other people instead of just taking a step back, basically instead of projecting my energy out to help them and figure it out for them.
Take a step back.
I take a step
and
back.
let people learn on their own.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Like that.
What a great healing experience.
I know. It's been a great healing experience. So, but at the time in 2016, when I was, working at this cultural exchange program, I needed a shift. I needed to so I quit my job, and I had, there's so much information about quitting a job without having a job, that I've, really, probably need to look at too in meditation. But my mom and dad were like so mad at me for quitting this job without having something lined up. And I bought a car and I drove Lyft. That was like my thing that I had lined up, because I thought I was going to go back to school to be a kindergarten teacher. And I really like kids, so I liked the energy. And I think a few of my careers at the time, I had wanted to be a kindergarten teacher at some point, but like there were all these something has redirected me away from that. And maybe in my 60s, I'll be a kindergarten teacher. You never know. But for now, I am not a kindergarten teacher. I actually ended up in HR. But before that, I was going through this experience when I was 26 of, it's like that quarter life crisis. That's how it felt, of figuring out like what am I interested in the workplace. I do like startups, and I got my first taste of working at a startup. It was my fourth job at the time, so I was driving Lyft. I was nannying for an 11-year-old girl who we both nannied for. I had a babysitters club, and then we also Lili is not part of my work experience. I'm like, we as me and myself. So then I also worked at a nightclub. I did bottle service on Saturdays. And then I also started working at a big tech company, like a very successful startup. And I started noticing like the energetic dynamics in that workplace. They didn't talk to each other. They only used what they sold, the tool to communicate. And I thought that was so interesting. They would only talk to each other in like the kitchen or communal areas. But people were at their desk, it was like you could hear a pin drop. It was so quiet. And so I thought that was so fascinating. And then they had all these rules and regulations around like people coming in to interview, because those were the people who I would check in. And then, I made some like really cool, like I was only there for a month, but I made cool connections. But in that month, I was able to apply to like 200 jobs. And then I got a job working for a presentation coach, coaching IPO roadshows and executive teams. So that set me up to become an executive assistant at a very large company in the Silicon Valley. And I learned how to be an EA. I was working at an internal ad agency. So it was a really creative environment. It was a really fun environment. I got to see like how EAs are in a corporate structure. So the etiquette that you have to have, like I was a contractor EA, so I wasn't allowed to talk to the other EAs outside of my marketing department. I had to have the internal full-time EA communicate for my entire department. Like if my executive needed a meeting with another person in marketing outside of our department, I had to go through the other EA to get time with their EA for them to get time. So it was a really like red tape. There's things that you need to do and things that you're not allowed to do type of environment. So that was another workplace energetic environment that I thought was, oh, that's kind of odd. But then it pieced together like my desire to go back to school. I got my master's in organization development at University of San Francisco, and I graduated in 2021. And so I decided to like start thinking about that at the time when I was an EA at that big company. And then a lot of my friends got furloughed in December of 2018. The organization, the department got reorged. So some people got furloughed, some people got fired or terminated. And then other people were moved to other departments. And so I was left over and I was like, oh, there's no way I'm staying in this organization. Like all of my friends are gone. The culture is gone. And then I got a job supporting a very young CEO at a Series B startup. And now they are so successful and blown up. But I started supporting him. I took on, it was him and the head of business. And then I was there for about a year and a half or so, from January 2019 to mid 2020, right when the pandemic was full force, new pandemic vibes. But I was able to learn so much. And that was when I had gotten into my grad program. I was focused on like working with executive teams, like how to make them more successful. That was my goal at the time. And so I was supporting this really young CEO through his growth experience. And it was a growth experience for me as well, of being kind of a HBIC type of EA, but still really friendly and like bubbly. And I like to get to know everyone, and I like to know the tea. I love to know like the social dynamics of the workplace, like the energy. Like I can already know, like by observing for like a month, I can see like who's friends with whom, who trusts whom, who collaborates with whom, and then who likes whom. And all four of those things are never the same. And so from reading the energy of other people, my colleagues, I can pick up that information. So I was able to do that at that startup. And then the pandemic hit. I came back from like a 3-week European organization development trip. 2 of my executives had quit. I had supported the CMO and the CRO, and then I had 2 eng managers. So I was at 6 people when I came back, and then I was at 4 people. And then I was also interviewing to be an event marketing manager because I was focused on corporate events and working with executive teams on like how to drive revenue. That was part of what I was working on with the CRO of organizing these events. I'm like, oh, I really like events. Like I threw our holiday party and it was like super easy. And so I'm like, oh, this is such a like easy thing and it just flows naturally. But then I came back February 2020. I got the job, but there was no like bump in pay, which now that I'm in HR, there should have been a bump in pay
Right.
for the type of work that I would have been doing. But then a month later, as I was transitioning, everyone went remote. Events died because the pandemic went like full force, and no one knew how bad this pandemic was going to be, or if it was going to be like that, you know, what's that movie where they all die from a pandemic, or if it was going to be like a sickness. So they moved me back into a part-time EA role, and then they furloughed most of the people team to like 16 hours a week. And I'm like, okay, I can't, like, how much longer? So that was like from March, maybe end of March, they like made us all part-time. And then in like June, I was like, I think you need to let me go. And my manager was like, we'll never let you go. And I
had to ask them.
Yeah, I had to ask them to let me go because if I had quit, I would not have been able to claim unemployment.
Right.
And I was like, hey, I think you need to let me go because I'm not making enough money. And if you don't know how long we're going to be part-time, like this isn't going to work out for me. So they let me go. They actually gave me a severance, which was really nice. I think it's because of like this like never burn a bridge mentality that I had. So I was like always really nice to people and overly helpful and like perfect at work, or, you know, from my own perception of what perfect was. And then I was able to I was fully enjoying my fun employment. Luckily I was only unemployed for 6 weeks during the, you know, kind of the heat of the pandemic in the beginning. And then I got a job as an EA for another young CEO. He's my age, not that I'm young, but like, you know, a younger, a newer CEO. So it's a hybrid. It's a very dynamic, culturally dynamic company. It's like half India, half US. So I came in focusing on like how to create a global company culture. And I was in my grad program at the time. So I was really focused on like building company culture and building, you know, values and figuring out like, you know, how to structure the organization. So that was a really cool experience working with him. And then I went in on our walk and talk, and there were like I had a lot of anxiety on that walk and talk because I was like, I had gone in with the intention of moving into like a different role I almost said the name, but at my other company, that I had been furloughed from, and I had told them to like let me go. And so I was like, I just had a lot of resistance to continuing to be an executive assistant because it can be a very time consuming job. And so going in, I would start at like 7 a.m. and then I would work until like 11 p.m. Because we were global, and part of my duties were to connect with India. And it just was not sustainable for me, for my own mental health. And everyone was like, Zoom burnout was a thing. And I think we're way past that point now. But like, I really could not. So going into that walk and talk interview with this executive, I knew full well that I really didn't want to be an EA, but I just took a job to take a job. And it ended up working out in my favor because now I've moved into HR. I've been in HR. I'm at that same company. I've been in HR for almost a year and a half. My 2 year at the company is in August. And I've learned so much. I've had 2 consultants who've trained me in everything in HR. And so you really, even if at the time I have seen like, oh, I ignored a red flag or I ignored my gut feeling about taking this job, but I ended up making it work for me and kind of like probably over controlling the situation to make it work for me. But it ended up paying off, and now I work in HR, and I am no longer an EA, which is great. And so it's taught me a lot of like energetic lessons in a way of like how to not get yourself in these types of situations where you're working like 15-hour days.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was
so crazy.
It was a lot. And I think like at the time I justified it, well, like I'm not able to travel. I'm not able to go anywhere at the time because we're all stuck at home. And it ended up paying off. And I was also like in my grad program at the time too. So I was doing grad school. I was working these like crazy hours and I made it work. Magical mystery happened.
You just do it.
You just make it happen. You make it work. Yeah. And so that kind of leads me off to today where I think my interest in energy in the workplace and my passion for that and being able to just kind of read the room and like that set me up and made my job as an EA easier. And then also was like, oh wait, people get paid to do this. This is like a real profession in the organization development space. You get to do whatever you want to improve the organization in a way. And so based on your customers' needs or your clients' needs, if you're a consultant, but you're able to look at the issues in the workplace. Like it's like looking at the cobwebs, cleaning out the skeletons in the closet. Like that's personally what I love about my job. Like, oh, there's a skeleton. Let's like dust him off and like make him look shiny and new. Or her.
Well, the great thing is that as a psychic, you're able to pick up at even more details beyond like just the physical space. Right. I can only imagine what comes up in those organizations.
Totally.
Because there's a lot of people too.
Oh, totally. And so when I'm having these conversations with my manager, they always want like data and proof. And like, I'm like, this is where my like, abilities don't really work in my favor. Cause like, this is all just me knowing. I just automatically know like what's happening in the org. I don't need to have like too many people validate that. But then all of a sudden I'll like pick up on a vibe. And then like 2 of my colleagues will be like, this happened and this happened. And I'm like, oh, I was picking up on that energy and I kind of had a feeling that this was happening. But it's like when you're in that HR space and you're like flagging it to people, they want like the evidence. They want the facts, the documentation to support it. And so that's been a good growth period for me of like, being able to be so intuitive, but without having to get involved. And one of my mentors at work, she's like, you need to meet people where they're at. And that has been like the most beautiful lesson that I've learned in this workplace of like meeting people where they're at. And if they're at a place where they are feeling some type of way, they can be over there and feel that way. I don't have to feel that way. I'll meet them in the middle and see like how can HR assist or like how can we provide guidance, but not necessarily fixing their issue. Where before I would want to fix their issue and solutionize and brainstorm and like kind of get overly involved when that's something that they might not have even needed that information from me, or like they might need just a space to like tell me what's happening and flag it. They call it flagging it to HR. So like and then sometimes people get weird about flagging it to HR because then it's like a serious thing. And I'm like, well, you're just communicating to me and letting me know what's happening in this dynamic or this situation. So it's been a very, very interesting, challenging, but yet beautiful experience, shifting my career and going through that whole journey. And I never thought I would be in HR. Like I knew I would be in a role of like helping people, but I never thought at the end of the day, I think I really want to be an organizational psychologist. Like that's my what I'm working and striving towards. So the next step would be to get like a PhD, which sounds really cool because I'll be Reverend Dr. Shannon Miller, eventually. Like, because Lili and I are both reverends from that clairvoyant training program we took. But Lili, I feel like I've talked enough about my job.
No, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that experience. And, and I think it's just, I love the fact that you just, you're able to, I guess, integrate or your past experiences with where you are, and also your this intuitive program too. It all kind of came together.
Yeah.
Highlighting your abilities, all your gifts that you have.
Yeah.
I just find it so fascinating.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, but I would love to learn more about your career experience.
All right.
Like where it's taking you, what you've learned.
Let's dive in.
Yeah.
We'll start from the beginning. So I had my first job when I was 18 years old, and I started as an English teacher. Mind you, I had no experience as a teacher. If you listened to our first episode, or maybe not, I was born and raised in Brazil. I came to the U.S. and because I wanted to attend high school. It was my dream, So I came, had my all-American experience, went back to Brazil, and then the travel agencies that I traveled through, so I guess they were running a little school for the next exchange students, and they wanted, teachers to kind of help them improve their English, get more conversational English. And they thought, I guess, my English was pretty good. So they just invited me to come, and I loved the fact that back in those days, they really trusted us, at such a young age, no experience. But they were like, yeah, come in. And I would just start teaching based on what I knew, made some money, which was kind of exciting. So I did that for a little while until I got into college. I graduated from this university in Brazil, and I have a BA in advertising and publicity. I also have a post-graduation in marketing. So back in those days, I was like interning at a lot of advertisement agencies, recording studios, and everything like related to that. And I kind of thought that was my path, like, oh, I'm going to work with advertisement. But, life has other plans, or the universe has other plans for you. So the fact that I was working in studying marketing, I ended up working as a marketing coordinator at this travel agency. And they, would send also people to, different parts of the world for exchange programs, or just like, touristy destinations type of things. And that brings me to the U.S. because through them, they had a partner here in the U.S. and they needed someone temporarily. So I came to work for this cultural exchange, it's a cultural exchange program organization back in 2003. But it was like a temporary job. And back in those days, I was like, yeah, I'll stay in the U.S. for maybe 1 or 2 years. Those 2 years now, they're almost 20 years in the U.S.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know. So I just ended up staying. And then I first came and lived in San Francisco for a year. And then 2004, I moved to LA. And then I took like any job that I could find. I work at a retail store. I work at a hotel. And it was kind of cool because when you live in LA, you're seeing all the celebrities, so that was kind of exciting to be in that space. But it was kind of tough too, because as kind of like you, there were times I've had like 3 different jobs, I was doing this retail job. I was working at a job. I was babysitting too. I also started at the same time babysitting like as a side gig. So I'm kind of like everywhere, all over the place. And then I went to work for the student travel agency because I just couldn't handle that anymore. And it was so exhausting. You're on your feet all day long. So I went to work for this travel agency, and that agency, my shift started at 6 a.m. too.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It was tough because I had to wake up like, I don't know, like at 4:30 in the morning to be there at
Like
6.
way too early,
It's
in my opinion.
no, it is.
Yeah.
It just is. And my physical body was just not happy about that because you end up, sacrificing other things in order to go to bed early. But, I did that for a little while. And so I've had a lot of like customer service oriented jobs. And because I've always been very friendly. I don't know if it's my Brazilian
It's a vibe.
it's a vibe, demeanor, a vibe, and that's how we are. We're very welcoming type of people. So in 2008 I was like, you know what, I need to apply for something that I don't start as early, and I can make more money too, because I wasn't making hardly any money back in those days. I was working so much but barely making it, by the end of the month. So I started to work for an English school, and that's where it set off my career in international education. And because I also think I was pretty international myself, I speak other languages. I ended up actually working for 4 different English schools throughout the years. So I've had this career in international education for about, I want to say like 10 years. And I also went to work for a college. I worked with international student services and admission. I met a lot of international students throughout the years. And it was a fun job, but it was very draining too, because there was a never a dull moment in those jobs. Super dynamic. There was a lot going on. There was hundreds of students coming in and out of the schools. And you have a lot of people with different backgrounds. There's going to be disagreements, and there's going to be things that happen, that they do some things in a way in their country. They think they can do it here in the US, and then there was a lot of different challenges that would come with that. But it was like always on the go. Go. And some of those schools, they also had what we called an emergency phone, which meant that we were pretty much 24/7.
Oh, God.
I know.
That sounds awful.
No, it's just, and we didn't even get paid for that. I'm just putting that out there, It didn't mean that like we had to I didn't have it every week, but we sometimes would rotate within the staff that we had available. So it meant that like on the weekends, people would call you for all different stuff, or even like during the evenings, like outside work, people would just call for all sorts of things, and you kind of had to be available. I'm going to put it quote unquote.
Right.
And it's like one of those things that, so you can you want to have a social life, but you're still kind of tied to work in a way. So that being said, I was also kind of babysitting, outside, this full-time jobs that I've had, making some extra money. And in between jobs too, I also always would go back to babysitting. So 2014, I decided to move to San Francisco. I think I was back then, I was in LA, and when you just know it's time for a change. And I was just kind of tired of, the situation I was in, and it was time for a change. So I moved to the US, and I came to work for that same cultural exchange program organization that I worked in 2003, but it was just like a different department now. And that's where I met Shannon.
You moved to San Francisco in 2014. Okay.
2014. That's when I moved back pretty much.
Yeah.
So moved back here, and I don't know. I don't think I worked there in barely like a year, I want to say. For me, working at a type of environment where you are sitting in a cubicle under the fluorescent lights.
It was so bright.
Oh my gosh. And it's just it was kind of draining in a way.
Like a little lab rat.
Yeah. It was kind of sad.
Yeah.
But I was just unhappy with that setting too, So I decided to go back to work for another English school And I worked there for 2.5 years. And then in 2017, I actually got laid off from that school. So they laid off a bunch of people, myself included, and the school actually later closed. It was kind of like a blessing in disguise. It was one of the most challenging things that happened because I was devastated when I got laid off too, because I was someone that had a very hard time just separating work stuff from my personal life. Things would just kind of bleed into each other. And I would take a lot of the work energy into home. I would go home and I would still be thinking about it, I was still like ruminating about all that stuff. So I was still kind of carrying all this. And that defined, I thought that was my identity, this is who I was. And I took things like so personally, if I made a mistake at work, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. I'm not worthy. So there was like all the stuff going on in the back of my mind. And there was also the time, around like 2017, I think that's where my anxiety really took a turn to escalating to panic attacks. And I was like, well, I'm kind of like suppressing, but at the same time, I knew I needed to make a change because that was not fun to be in that space.
Yeah. Everything comes to the surface.
It just does, and my body was just reflecting all these internal struggles that I was going through. But my mind was like, well, but I have to work hard. I have to go back to that type of work, and that's the hustle mentality. I can't allow myself to be in that space. And but I kind of went back to babysitting. I kept applying for jobs, a lot of admin work. I thought that's what I was kind of meant to do. And I applied for jobs that I actually worked in the past, and I kept getting rejection after rejection. And then at some point, you just think to yourself, like, wait a minute. There's just the universe telling you that this is no longer for you. So now I see those rejections as redirections, because that I was done with that. That was already a chapter of my life that I had to close, but I had a hard time letting go. But that's also the time in 2017, I started also this meditation and clairvoyant training. But it worked out, I mean, it was hard in the sense that because I was working for many different families. So there were weeks where I had like a lot of babysitting jobs, and there were weeks I had none. And this is what it is when you work on your own.
Yeah, inconsistency.
Yeah. So there might be this inconsistency that you just don't really know how much money you're going to bring in every month or every week. But things worked out. I was able to keep going with my clairvoyant training, and went through we get into 2020 now. Pandemic hit. I kept babysitting, and I feel so lucky that I was able to do it, because it was also the time that everybody was working from home. Kids were taking classes from home. The parents were desperate for some help. So it kind of worked out, for my benefit. So I kept working, and then I went to take classes online, because that's pretty much the setup that we're still doing it nowadays. So bringing to today, I no longer work for all these families, babysitting everywhere, but I feel blessed that I was able to connect with so many families and children. I feel like I've learned a lot, especially with children. They teach you, a lot of different things. And now I work for only one family. I work as a nanny, and I've been working for them for the last 3 years, almost 3 years. So I basically have seen the kids grow.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's been really cool. And now I teach meditation at the school that I graduated from. And in a million years, I would have never imagined this happening. I also work as an energy healer. So I basically, people book appointments with me and I look at their energy and I'll probably.
She's really great.
Oh, thank you so much. That is so
Shameless
nice.
shout out. Like really, really great.
Thank you so much. That is so nice. But I'm now kind of in the process of building my own business as an energy healer or having my own healing practice too, as I teach meditation. So I'm kind of wanting to transition more into having my own business. I decided that I no longer want to be working for organizations, and I know some people, they thrive being in a company setting, but it's not for me.
Yeah. As soon as you figure out it's not for you, get out.
Yeah. And you have to do what's best for you. I like to have this freedom, the independence of setting my own hours, taking time off when I need it. It's a different setting, so you kind of, whatever you do, you have to kind of make it work for you.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where I am now. And it's interesting to look at where I am today. And it's just this feeling that what I'm doing now, facilitating healing for others, it just feels aligned. When you feel a sense of purpose in life. And I haven't felt that, I think, at all. Any of my jobs, when I look back,
right.
I mean, there were jobs that it was kind of fun and I enjoyed it, but nothing like now.
Like it just feels like real.
It feels real. You feel it in your body. But I think just to kind of like summarize too, some of the lessons that I've learned is that, I'm not defined by my job. That doesn't define who I am and my values.
Yeah, or your worth.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think as we've done a lot of healing and going through all the self-development, I'm able to discern, what is other people's energy, other people's information, and what is mine. So have more clarity about separating work from my personal life. So I no longer bring all that energy, that outside energy, into my personal space. But not perfect.
Right.
It happens sometimes.
Would you say that you prefer to be a separator versus an integrator when with work and home? Because I feel like there's a concept in the OD space of you have to the people who are used to going to their 9 to 5, then they go home and they have that structured separation where they can mentally when they're at work, it's kind of like that new show Severance on Apple TV. It's really cool where they implant this device in their brain where when they're at work, they don't remember their personal life.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool show. And then when they leave, they go through an elevator and then they forget what they were working on.
Wow.
And they just know where they work and how to get to work. And
interesting.
Their at-home personality comes back on.
How interesting. I think I should check it out. I mean, in theory, it sounds amazing, right? That we were able to just really separate one from the other, but let's just be realistic that doesn't happen.
No, it's really challenging.
It's challenging, even though I think I've got better throughout the years, but of course there's still aspects of my work that will kind of, still be part of my personal life, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's just finding that more of a harmony between those two, but not letting work overtake or even overwhelm your personal life to the point where you have no personal life.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that has happened in the past for me.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think it's one of the last for me was just being more aware of that, just being more aware. And I would say another lesson, it also just to listen to your body messages, as I guess Shannon also mentioned in her story and my story, there's anxiety happening. There's in my case also panic attacks, and just your body is just trying to send you messages,
gut feeling,
intuition, and all this stuff, and just listening to that and paying attention to it, because
and trusting it.
Yes, exactly, because it's clearly trying to communicate something to you, and that for me, is something that I bring it to my life today. So every time my body is doing, trying to tell me something like, okay, I need to pause. Okay, what is it? So just taking a moment just to acknowledge that. I think that's been one of my biggest lessons too.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson to learn. And it's a skill set in a way that you pick up from having gone through those experiences. And I think everyone has this ability to pick up that skill set of, it's just like tapping in, tuning in to yourself in those situations and quieting the outside noise, the information from other people, and tuning in and just like listening to your body, yourself, like whatever that means for you. And seeing like, is this energetically aligned with me? Is this job energetically aligned? Is this career path? Is this, in workplace environment, whatever it is that you're dealing with? Is it truly in line with what I want and where I think my career path is going to go? And like, you might not know that answer. And like, I think it takes a lot of trial and error experiences to figure that out.
I think life in general.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I know. Apply to anything. Like, yeah.
I think life itself.
No, it's so true. But that's like something that I'm still currently learning and going through.
Me too.
And I think it's like a never ending experience, which is exciting in a way, because then you get to learn new things about yourself and figure out what you like, what you don't like, and what you're willing to tolerate versus, and also like the amount of permission you give yourself in those like decision-making capabilities. And so when you're going through that, like if you're at a crossroads moment of a career crossroads moment of like, do I go here or do I go there? Kind of taking that internal moment to reflect, like, how much permission are you giving yourself to make the decision that's going to be in line with what you truly want?
Yeah, or what you need.
And what you need, yeah.
At that moment, yeah. And again, I think there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's that whatever you decide, it will be the right thing for you at that moment. Whatever that comes out, because some people might think, I made that wrong decision, take that wrong job. And I say, no, maybe it wasn't aligned.
Right.
But it taught you something.
Yeah.
As you can probably tell by our work experiences and things that we've been through, there's definitely a lesson that came from any of those jobs.
Every experience.
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah.
But this was great. Yeah. Sharing all this fun job. Shenanigans.
Quote unquote fun. Yeah.
Fun job experiences.
But it's been great. And we appreciate everyone who's listened in and, tuned into this episode of Psychic Girls Next Door. We are excited to continue to, post these podcast episodes. And if you have any questions or are dealing with similar situations, please leave a comment, email us your questions, and hopefully we'll have a Google Voice mail set up so you can call us and maybe we can share your story if you feel comfortable with us sharing on the podcast in the future about what you're experiencing today.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That would be fun, right?
Yeah, that sure will be. Yes. Well, we'll see you guys on our next episode.
Thank you so much.